Fáilte Ash to How to Be Irish with me, Úna Harty. I'm going to be jumping into my interview with today's guest, Gemma McSherry, very shortly. But before we do that, I'd really appreciate if you gave this podcast a 5-star rating on Spotify. If you're watching it anywhere else or listening along anywhere else, please do give me the thumbs up and all that good stuff. All right, let's get into it. Gemma McSherry is a writer, former journalist and content creator from Newtown Ards, County Down. Gemma spent the last 10 years working as a journalist, working for outlets such as The Newsletter in Belfast, The Guardian in London, and covering human rights violations in the Ukraine war for Amnesty International. In July 2025, she began posting on TikTok ahead of trying to secure a book deal, and quickly amassed 20,000 followers in 5 months. Gemma speaks on TikTok about growing up in the north of Ireland, and her content centres around the themes of her novel, class, religion, and growing up as an outsider in a conservative state. Her work also explores the connection between Ulster loyalist fundamentalist Christianity and American ethno-nationalist Christianity. Gemma, you're very welcome to the How to Be Irish podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. Yes, I'm good today. Thank you.
It's great to have you. Thank you so much for coming on. So there's a lot of themes that I'd like to explore with you today, but I think it might be good to give the listeners a little bit of a grounding in what kind of an environment you grew up in the north. I know that when you sent me your bio as well, you wrote Northern Ireland / the north of Ireland. So
Yes.
We might touch on that a little bit as well. And could you just give us a bit of an example of, like, I suppose, what your upbringing was like?
Sure. So my personal upbringing was a little bit different to a lot of people in the north because I'm half, like, my parents, one is from a Catholic background, one's from a Protestant background, but they also divorced when I was like 7. So there was never like a sort of sense of like family coming together. It was like when you were with this parent, you were on the Catholic side, and this parent, you're on the Protestant side. So I think I grew up seeing the differences. You know, it wasn't until I was older that I was like, oh, this is a Protestant trope, this is a Catholic trope. But it was like I was always going in between these two different worlds almost. But like you said at the start of this, I was literally born in Newtown Ards in County Down. And something that was really significant in my upbringing that I now realise, but you know, at the time it felt normal. But when I was going to school every day, the streets are lined with Union Jack flags. Like, sometimes the curbs were painted red, white, and blue. So I grew up knowing that I was growing up in Ireland, but everything around me was telling me that I was not in Ireland. And it wasn't until I went to like the Republic sort of years later, like probably my late teens, early 20s, that the difference in the North and the Republic really hit me, where I was like, oh, it really is a different country. It really is going to somewhere completely different. And it's not just about like the currency or anything. It was like, I'm on the same landmass, but I'm in a completely different environment.
I remember anytime I visited the north, I've noticed those curbs. I also noticed like street signs would only be in English. They're not in Irish as well. Little things like that. But I suppose more probably beyond the things that we just notice day to day. You mentioned on your TikTok about these people called coffee shop Christians. And I know people kind of laugh and it's kind of funny and stuff like that. But I had never heard of something like this. So I'm from County Limerick. I've never heard of this, but this seems to be a thing that a lot of people in the north know about. Could you explain what this is and why you think this might be in the north and it's not in the south?
Yes, definitely. So the term coffee shop Christians was like accidentally coined because I was just trying to describe a certain type of Christian from the north, and they're very similar to Christians that you get in America. So they're like very cool. They're like, Jesus is this radical dude, and they kind of use this like veil of coolness to hide their often very bigoted Christian values. Now, I'm not saying all Christians are bigoted, like people in my family are Christian, you know. There's a certain type of Christianity that we know, right, is very bigoted. It's very homophobic. You know, often the people can be racist. They have certain views about what women should and shouldn't do with their bodies and things like that. And it used to be that those kind of Christians, you could spot them, you know, you knew who they were like. They were like the Ian Paisley type people, and you could tell that's what they were. Now they have this like Americanized coolness, and we say coffee shop Christians because they drink a lot of coffee and they hang out in coffee shops, and they use this sort of like cool coffee shops, bean bags, pizza parties type vibe to hide what is underneath, which a lot of the time is quite insidious. And I've had a lot of messages from people who have grown up in this environment. So just for context, I was like christened, I suppose, like in a Presbyterian church as a baby. So I did go to church growing up, I never believed in it, but I went to church and I was in like the Scripture Union for a bit, which is a kind of club in school for Christians. I went on a couple of Scripture Union holidays. So I was really around these people right up until like my mid-20s. So I know them very well. And a lot of them appear to be progressive, but behind closed doors, they're absolutely not.
And you said you went to Scripture Union, so like people would refer to it as SU for short. When I first saw that, I was like, student union, like another thing I'd never heard of before.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were christened Presbyterian, so did you go to a Presbyterian school as a result?
I went to, so in the north, our schools are like segregated. So my secondary school, if you're going to like a state school, it is often like union or like Christian Protestant by default. You would usually choose to go to a Catholic school. So there was a Catholic school in my town that I didn't go to, but then my secondary school was the same. So I went to like a state grammar school. But my school was extreme. I wouldn't have said it was Presbyterian because there was all different types of people there. There were a lot of Presbyterians, and a lot of the teachers probably were Presbyterian, but it was more so just like Protestant Christian, and then that also meant that it lent itself to like unionist and loyalist kind of viewpoints as well that came from the teachers and the pupils.
And so what kind of views or perspectives would you have been hearing on a daily basis?
Well, I can give you an example, which was, so I'm 32. So I was in history class before the Savile report came out about Bloody Sunday. And I was taught that there was like aggravation on both sides. And we had like a essay question or whatever, which was sort of like who shot first. So there was very much a pro-British sentiment in the school, also very much a pro-British military sentiment. There was like an Apache, I don't know, some big massive helicopter like landed in our school field, and we all went out for the day to like look at this helicopter that was part of the British Army. So there was definitely like a sense in the school that you were British. Also, like at a school play, you would do the national anthem. So there was definitely like, yeah, a British, like you were in a British environment, and it was very clear you were in a British environment.
And as a result, how would you say that shaped your identity?
Ooh, massively, considering I'm still talking about it every day. Like, so the first day that I went to school, I didn't really know that I was one of the first things someone said to me in that school was, "Are you a Fenian?" And I was like, I don't know, Amma, like, I don't know. And because, like I say, my parents were divorced, like, I learned a lot about Protestants and Catholics, but I couldn't, like, also I was 11, I wasn't conceptualized enough and put in context of everything. But because my surname is McSherry, people obviously just perceived me as being Catholic from the offset. So that was like, that shaped me a bit, because it was like you were starting off school immediately knowing that you didn't really fit into like the majority of the people in the school. That's not to say I didn't have friends who were Protestants. Like I still have friends even now who are Protestants and stuff. But it was like, yeah, I was just starting off in a place in that school knowing that I felt different to a lot of the people there. Because a lot of the people there, where Newton Ards is at the top of the Ards Peninsula. So you get a lot of people coming from down the peninsula, so like Portavogie and like the sort of Ballyhalbert and places like that. So you get people coming to Newton Ards, and Newton Ards for a lot of people from the peninsula would be like the equivalent of their Belfast to Newton Ards. It's the main place that they'll go to. They might go to Ards a couple of times a month as a big day out. So you were getting a lot of people who are from very close-knit communities come into that school as well. And when I say close-knit communities, also very, very Protestant, a lot of Free Presbyterians, which is Ian Paisley's church.
Mm-hmm. And the Free Presbyterians, what's different about them compared to other Presbyterians and other Protestants?
Well, they have the real truth of the Lord. They are the only ones who have the truth. I think that's what they'd say. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's something like, they're like the free fundamentalist, there's like 5 stages that have separated them from the original church. But I mean, when I was in school, so some of them believe the earth is only 6,000 years old. And I was friends with girls who would do these songs that were like, haha, we didn't come from monkeys. They also, like, sometimes they had to wear like hats, cover their head for church, and wear skirts and stuff like that. They're very, very, very anti-abortion, very homophobic. I was actually looking up Free Presbyterian Church last week for some reason, and I was on the Wikipedia page and they have a whole section on Ulster says no to sodomy. So they had this real obsession with being homophobic. And I think a lot of them are probably still like that. And it comes up in their sermons and stuff as well.
Have you noticed a shift in the North from when you were young and attending school to now? Which I don't know, maybe perhaps you don't live in Northern Ireland anymore, you live in London, but have you noticed a shift? So you mentioned there how these people would have been like strongly anti-abortion. Do you think that that voice is as loud now as it was then?
I think so. And then I think also this sort of like the way it's shrouded in coolness now as well, because before, like I said, whenever I was younger, I knew what those people's views were. I knew where they were at, you know, I knew that they were anti-abortion or whatever. Whereas now, if say it was your colleague or someone, or you're just meeting one of these people out and about, you would think that they were liberal. You might not necessarily realize what their views actually are. So I think the sentiment is still the same amongst a lot of them. They just sometimes hide it in a better way.
And you mentioned in your intro about the ties between these types of people and then also in America, people who hold similar religious views. Do you think that they've learned that from America, the idea of like kind of shrouding it in this kind of cool hipster vibe?
Definitely. And I mean, it's really like a marketing tool, isn't it? Like at the end of the day, it's like a marketing technique, which obviously Americans are great at. But it's really, they have these like meetups. I don't really know the details of it, but they have these like big meetups between the like Christian evangelicals or fundamentalists in America and here. And someone left a comment one time and they used the term North Atlantic Christian accent or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was like they almost have like their own accent and their own like dialect to an extent, you know, because they have very much the same communication style as the Americans. And you know, a lot of the time people are getting married. So people they meet at these mixers and things like that. I actually know someone who like went to a wedding of one of these people who'd met at one of these Christian mixers. So there's definitely a big influence of that in the North, in these Christian circles. And then also you get an influence as well of things like anti-abortion rhetoric and, you know, sort of funding, for example, that goes towards anti-choice movements and things like that. So there's like a link up with the religious side, and then there's also a link up with sort of like the right-wing politics as well.
So it's very strategic on their end.
Totally.
So you've written a book and you're looking to get a book deal, and I suppose that's why you set up your TikTok. You say in your intro to a lot of your TikToks about why, you know, who you are, why you're here and what you're doing. And I'd love to hear more about your book and why you wrote it and what was the inspiration for it. Could you give us a bit of a synopsis?
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to do this. I haven't got to talk about it yet. So a synopsis, I suppose, it follows 3 characters. So one of the characters is a man. He's called Josh, and he's like your typical like rugby guy. He's from a lot of privilege. I suppose in the Republic context, he'd be like kind of like your GAA guy kind of guy, but I think rugby is a little bit different because it also has a lot of classist connotations within it. But he's from a very privileged background, and it's like, you know, he has this sort of like superiority complex, and he also like gets away with everything because his dad gets him out of stuff. And then there's another character called Erin, who is called Erin. So she's like identified within this school that they go to as being Catholic. So she feels like a bit of an outsider, but she desperately wants to be part of like the cool group. And then there's another character called Jade. She's like, get me out of this place. Like, I hate these people. But she manages to make friends with a girl called Kiva, who like, you know, is like her bestie. But it's really about like, growing up in what I've been saying, this kind of very conservative, small town environment. And I really wanted to write about the experience of growing up in a small town in the North, especially one that is so kind of, like conservative and religious, because I think a lot of books that I read that are set in the North are set in Belfast or Derry or somewhere, whereas I don't think this sort of small town experience is known enough. And then also the links that we have to this kind of MAGA stuff in America, I really wanted to write about, because you literally see Trump flags in the North, you see Confederate flags in the North, not all the time, it's not totally uncommon. And I really wanted to like highlight that because it's mad, you know, and I don't think people really realize it.
Yeah, no, I definitely didn't know about that. So you grew up in a small town.
Mm.
How did that inform your writing of this?
So I think it informed it because I really wanted to write. I wanted to write a book for the people that I grew up with that they would want to read it.
Mm.
And a lot of the people that I've grown up with, like, I think people from the north of Ireland are remarkably intelligent people, like inherently very intelligent, because we've got all of the shit to wade through what it means to be from the north. We've got multiple governments to be thinking about that impact our lives. And you also you could be in a work setting, or you could be in a meeting new people, and you're kind of having to judge where people might be from. You're constantly like analyzing things. So we're incredibly intelligent people, but I don't think we always sort of have like the vocabulary of like the literary elite or whatever. So I really wanted to write a book that was like you can read it. It doesn't matter like what your like academic level is or whatever. You can read it and you can get the themes and you can get the ideas that I'm trying to present in it. But it's like, yeah, like my nanny could pick it up and read it, And like I wanted to write a book that could be in like a cheap bookstore like the Works, as well as in like an indie bookstore, and it wouldn't feel like out of place in anywhere. And I was also massively inspired by Anna Burns's book Milkman, which honestly, until I read that book, I didn't realize people cared about the North in that way. Like I thought they only really wanted to hear about the Troubles. So reading that book and reading a book from the perspective of a woman, now, I mean, it is kind of set within the context of the Troubles, but it's not explicitly addressed. And reading a book that was from the perspective of a working class woman from the North, like blew my mind. And I was like, oh, it almost like gave me permission to write.
You mentioned there in your answer, I thought that was really interesting. You said that people from the north are extremely intelligent because they have to spend a lot of time and energy examining each
Mm-hmm.
person they meet and who they are, what's their background. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
I think we are like we're very witty. We're very good at reading a room. We're very good at like being able to kind of meet people where they're at and adjust ourselves. Like I think in America people call it code switching a lot,
Yeah.
but you are constantly adapting to your environment. Like say you are from a very like Catholic background or whatever, and you go and work in a job where everyone is extremely Protestant. Like there will be there'll be certain things that you don't say, there'll be certain things that you do say. You're constantly adapting, and the same thing works both ways. And I think we're constantly analyzing things. I think we're very, very like inherently analytical people. But I think it kind of gets lost a lot of the time because just the rhetoric about what it means to be from the north or whatever. And we also, just to go back to wit, like we use humor to get through things, and like people from the north are so funny, like such funny, witty, dry people. And I really wanted to capture that, well, try and capture that as well in the book, because I think that's something that like again gets lost in the history of the place.
Yeah, I suppose you're often probably associated with like really serious topics. Like I suppose I
Mm-hmm.
opened up this podcast with like, let's talk about like some very, very fundamentalist like religious views. But yeah, I mean there needs to be a bit of lightness with the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Something which I think a lot of my listeners, right, they're probably from the south. Um, I'm trying to cover the north a little bit more this season, because I'm really conscious about how it is contributing to Irish identity, and I really, really want
Mm-hmm.
to include that. This podcast is aiming to be a collection of like what it means to be Irish, like what is Irish identity in 2025, and so on. And I think the North has such a complex relationship with that. And I really, really want to capture that as much as possible. So if you're speaking to somebody who's from the South, who's from the Republic, whatever you want to say, how would you explain to them what the experience is of being somebody from the North in a way that they might not have heard before or they don't quite understand yet?
Okay, so I always explain it where I grew up, because obviously I can't speak for everyone. And like somebody who grew up in inner city Belfast is going to have a really different experience to me. But whenever I try to explain where I grew up, I'm like, I try and say, like, try and picture what it would be like to grow up somewhere like Alabama, or what, like, somewhere in like the deep south of America, as opposed to like Newton Ards feels more like somewhere in Alabama a lot of the time than it would if I go to like a town of a similar size in like Donegal or whatever. because of this like Protestant religious, culture that really does like underline a lot of things, like our schooling and everything like that. So that's how I try and explain it, which I know probably sounds a little bit far-fetched to some people. But then at the same time, I have had messages from people who are from the north who now live in places like that or have been to places like that, and they're like, yeah, like this actually makes sense. Also, we have the same amount of churches, like 50 different types of Protestant churches and stuff that they have there. There's only a couple of places in the world that have these denominations, and we're one of them, and so is like the Deep South. So I think there's a lot of similarities there, as opposed to like literally going across the border, driving an hour and you're in a different country. That really does feel like a different country.
There's been a lot of talk recently, or at least I have noticed, like if I go onto my YouTube and I look at the videos, there's a lot of mention about a united Ireland, reunification. I don't know why it's suddenly become more of a thing. I would like to stay on this topic for a little bit. So I suppose, first of all, why do you think this is something that people are talking about now more than ever?
Oh, I think people are more well. Obviously, I can only speak from being from the north, but I think before it was such, if you were talking about United Ireland, it was so kind of weighed down with the weight of all the bad stuff that happened in the Troubles, which like, I say like, oh, I'm an Irish Republican, but I mean like, I want an Irish Republic united. I'm not, I don't support political violence or anything like that. And I think for a very long time, if you said you were for United Ireland, people just turned up the ra. Do you know what I mean? They just thought you were supporting political violence. So I think now we've had time to move away from that. And a lot of young people, or younger people from the north in particular, who haven't really had time to think about United Ireland without that heavy political context, are now able to do so. And they're like, wait a wee second, a lot of things that are happening right now doesn't make sense. Also, obviously, Brexit, I think, was a big part of it as well. And that sort of made people realize, like, this, things aren't adding up here. And the fact that the vote in the north was, it was one of the times where people from both sides voted similarly. So I think that has opened it up as well. And then I think also just like people from the Republic are thinking about it more, like it's been mentioned in politics. Obviously Sinn Féin mention it quite a lot. And obviously Sinn Féin have gained traction in the north in the last couple of years. So I think it's like a lot of different moving parts that have brought it to this point.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot more talk about it, and I suppose I think there's a lot more cautious debate, which is a good thing. Like people are saying that, they're thinking about like, okay, what if we did reunite? Like, what would that look like? What would happen? What would need to be the steps that we'd need to take? You mentioned Brexit there, right? And that's obviously been talked about as a very large driver for this discussion. How did people in the north feel after Brexit was passed?
I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of people, but I think I suppose for the Protestant community, for the PUL community, so that's Protestant Unionist Loyalist, it might have been a moment of like reckoning a little bit, because it's like having to be forced to realize that you are attached to the landmass of Ireland. Like it's crazy. A lot of people from that community do not go to Ireland. They do not cross the border unless they're going to the airport or occasionally the rugby. Like a lot of them really have zero connection to Ireland. I've met people from that community who have never listened to trad. They've never been to Donegal. And it's like, I'm just kind of like, what? But I think being forced to realize that you are part of that landmass, and you can call yourself British till the cows come home, but at the end of the day, you are attached to this landmass, and now things are going to get harder. And going to get harder for their own communities. A lot of farmers, were really negatively impacted by that. So I think it forced a conversation on the fact that we are Northern Ireland, that I think a lot of people had crazily managed to avoid for years.
Yeah. What do you think are the barriers that we're going to face if we do choose to reunite?
Oh, I think people are understandably worried about the PUL community, and I see a lot of this. I get comments all the time anytime I mention something to do with United Ireland, people are like, there'll be so much violence, there'll be so much, and I'm like, okay, firstly, we've came so far from what it used to be. Like I was born in 1993, but I mean, I can remember like small things, but going to the airport in your car having to be checked over, and I remember looking out of the window of the car and was just surrounded by like army men with guns and shit. So like we've come so far, even from when I was born, that I think the threat of really widespread violence is maybe being overestimated a little bit. Also, the PUL community, especially the loyalist part of it, these are the people who are, in like, usually it's in the loyalist council estates. They are also victims of colonialism. And it's sometimes hard to say that because, understandably, people, are very frustrated with some of their actions. But these are people who are really disenfranchised. They don't understand a lot of the things that are happening in those communities. So yeah, I just think that there's more space now for thinking about a transition to United Ireland that doesn't have to result in widespread violence.
Do you think that is a feeling that is kind of only really felt by our generation? Like, what do the older generations? Do you think they're like perhaps too traumatized from the Troubles?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair point. For example, whenever I speak to my dad about anything like this, and he would be like, I would say he's like very much a liberal, like really like neoliberal to an extent, but it's like he can't unsee, and I understand this for a lot of people of that generation, they can't unsee the horrors of the Troubles.
Mm-hmm.
So to think about United Ireland, it almost brings them back to that time. And I think that goes for like both sides as well, so yeah, I think it is definitely like a generational shift in that regard. And I can understand why the older generation are a bit kind of like, can we just, my dad's position is always sort of like, can we just work for things for Northern Ireland of its own place? And I'm like, is it its own place though?
Yeah, what do you think? Like, are there a lot of those people that like see it as this own entity? Like, I suppose you described it having this very different culture, like particularly in the small towns, compared to the UK, compared to Ireland, compared to the US or whatever. Like, you live in London now, so obviously you've kind of been able to even compare and contrast a little bit more again. So is there a lot of people that are looking at Northern Ireland and thinking, like, in a way, like, I want to, by remaining with what it is currently, we are somewhat protecting that culture?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's kind of like really the essence of loyalism, because I don't think loyalists, I mean, they say they're British, but I don't think they are in the land of Britain, And I think to them, what it means to have Northern Ireland as Northern Ireland is intrinsic to them feeling, part of the UK. So absolutely, like, I think there's a sense that if anything was to change, then what are we, and like, it is a unique experience being from where I'm from, especially the this, like, what is it they call us, like the ceasefire babies, especially being this generation where you're kind of trying to define yourself for yourself. And I think that's why a lot of people cling to, whatever side it is that they do, because it is confusing and it is murky, and it's like, it's uncharted territory in a sense. And I think that's why a lot of people like the term Northern Ireland, and then also it becomes a massive trigger as well, which is why I say the Northern Ireland stroke the north of Ireland, because so many people get so triggered by the use of either of those. So I'm just like, let me just cover my bases and say both, because we are both.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about that? Like, I think I only noticed people using the north of Ireland recently. Now, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just I'm older, I've noticed more things, I'm taking in more sources, but has this always been a thing?
Yeah, so I'm the same. I've only noticed it being used. I mean, I definitely heard it from like people who were political, like openly political. I heard it growing up, right? But I always just said Northern Ireland because that's just what I said. My family, my Catholic side of my family, and this is like, my nanny's like in her 80s now, but she would always refer to it as the North and the Free State.
Okay.
So she would always have said Free State, not even Republic, really. But yeah, the North, the North of Ireland, the use of that, it's really like we're saying it to kind of signify our position on where the North sits, like it belongs to Ireland as opposed to belongs to the UK. I think that's really why people say it. I say both because I want to like cover my bases, but also like I'm not massively offended by the use of the term Northern Ireland because it is called that. And also, like, I studied law at master's level. And the reason I was using Northern Ireland a lot was because we do actually have our own legal jurisdiction. When I first started posting on TikTok, it was all about like, women's rights. I mean, I still talk about that a lot, but it was pretty much exclusively about women's rights and in the North. And they use the term Northern Ireland in that because that is our legal system.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally am not massively triggered by it, but a lot of people are.
Interesting. And if you hear the phrase United Ireland, what do you feel? What do you think?
Well, I had a dream. I really did have a dream one time that I was at this event where they were announcing the winner. They were announcing like the referendum or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I had this dream that was green, white, and orange confetti. So I really genuinely, every time I hear it, I just get this flash of like pure euphoria of this dream that I had. But I really do believe it's coming. Like, it is. Maybe, I mean, I actually think it's going to happen in my lifetime. Like, I genuinely do. But I really, really do think it's coming. And like, I'm not under any delusions. I don't think it's going to all of a sudden, we're all going to just be like out in the street and everyone's going to be fine. Like, it's obviously going to be difficult. There's obviously going to be a transition. But I do think it'll make life easier for everyone because, like, the nation state, the idea of the nation state, the idea of belonging to a state is kind of important for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a lot of people actually need a sense of identity beyond themselves. And when you are somewhere where it's like, especially for the PUL community, they want to be British, but they're in Ireland, but the Brits don't care about them. If you go like 2 or 3 generations down the line post Irish unification, I actually think they will be much happier within their communities because you can still be patriotic, and I think it actually, in the long run, I think it can be nothing but a positive. It can't be any worse than what we've lived through.
Yeah, very interesting. In a way, as somebody from the South, I sometimes don't feel like I have an opinion on it, or I'm cautious to have an opinion on it because at the end of the day, it's going to affect people in the North. And I don't feel like I deserve to like say something on that. Now, I don't know what the referendum, if that comes around, what that's going to look like. And I presume they're going to get people from the North and from the South to vote on it. But in a way, I just feel a little bit, I feel like it's not my place. What do you think about that?
So I think that's really interesting. And I did a post a wee while ago because I noticed that a lot of people from the Free State, I'm going to use as my nanny calls it, are very vocal on Palestine, understandably and rightly so, right? Very vocal on Palestine, calling for a free Palestine. But I noticed when the judgment came out about Soldier F, that those people were not vocal about the gross miscarriage of justice that had happened there. And I was like, Ireland's still colonized. Like, you can call it what you want, but at the end of the day, it is still colonized. And so I actually think we need people from the Republic to be calling for this. And I understand sort of being a bit like having a bit of trepidation about it, but I'm not an expert. You know what I mean? Like I don't know the answers. And people always say to me, what do you think is going to happen when it unifies? And I'm like, I don't know, just, it can't be any worse than what we went through. But we actually really need people from the Republic, from the South, to be on board with this because that's the only way it's going to change. And I think that, just call for it, just be like Irish unification now or whatever the slogan is, because at the end of the day, the momentum that comes from whenever, like what happened with repeal of the eights, once you actually get people engaged and on board, who knows what can happen?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's definitely an element of us kind of putting our heads in the sand and ignoring, like you mentioned, the Soldier F verdict. I mean, there definitely wasn't enough talk about that in like Free State media publications and such. I had a guest on last season. He was very much involved with the Irish American movement for United Ireland, and he used Free State all the time, which was I kind of love it. Like,
I love it. It's like, I think it's quite powerful because like if somewhere's free, that would imply that somewhere is not.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually like it's a good trigger phrase,
Yeah, absolutely. I never thought about it like that. So you're talking about some very intense topics, Gemma, like on your TikTok, and I've noticed you do get an awful lot of hate. You get a lot of messages that are comments that are going to be really difficult to deal with. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you find that? Has that affected you much?
Not at all. I don't know if there's like something wrong with me. I could probably get diagnosed, like genuinely, I could probably be diagnosed with like a load of different things. I'm actually not diagnosed with anything. But I don't know if there's something wrong with me. I just like, okay, so my main, like genuinely, okay, my main inspiration in life is my nanny, right? But like my main artistic inspirations are like Beyonce and Cardi B. Like I just love these women so much. And anytime they do anything, people hate. Like Cardi B opened like an orphanage or something recently, and people were like, "Of course she's going to do that." And it's like, so I just think if you're getting hate, you're probably. I mean, obviously, if you're being a really hateful person, it's different. But I don't think I'm being particularly hateful. I think I'm just like talking about my lived experience and the lived experience of other people. And I just am like, well, if people are hating on me, then I must be saying something that's like provoking that type of reaction. And if I'm talking about racists and homophobes and they hate me, I'm not really going to be that bothered. I do get a lot of hate from men, but that's kind of common when you're a woman and you post yourself online. Like, I think I'm definitely opening myself up to it a little bit more because, like, sometimes I do talk about like gender-based violence and men's behaviors and things like that. But like, I know girls who are, fitness influencers who don't talk about anything like that and they still get hate from men. So it's like, it is what it is, And yeah, I just feel like, honestly, I don't think I would have gotten the, like, being interviewed here or like any of the other things that have happened in the last like 5 months since I started posting. And I don't think I would have had as much engagement as I have if I didn't also get the negative, So yin and yang.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's it. You talk a little bit about using the hate you turn it around. You talk about self-actualization. Could you explain more about that?
Yeah, so like, I mean, it's a little bit of like a woo-woo term, but like I am a woo-woo person. But basically it's like, haters can actually teach you a lot about yourself if you really listen to it. And people do project a lot. So I get comments all the time being like, you just sit in the house all day, you must just be so miserable. And I'm like, you're just telling me your life story, like you're just letting me know how you feel. And so I think it can teach you a lot about how to like understand people and understand why people are speaking to you the way that they are. And like I do actually have, like, weirdly, I have a lot of empathy for some of my trolls because, like, it is tough, if you see a woman who is like confident, and I'm 6 foot tall as well, so I've always triggered men everywhere I went anyway. But if you see someone who's confident and who's openly like putting themselves out there, it's sort of going to, if you feel like you're lacking something, that's going to make you feel like you're lacking it even more, So yeah, I just feel like you can take that and turn it around and use it to your advantage and use it to like propel you forward because there is a lesson there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do this podcast. I suppose I put myself out there in a little bit in that. I mean, though it's kind of different because I'm facilitating guests and their views and their stories. It's a little bit different, whereas you're giving your opinions, you're sharing your stories. Being a woman, like I remember one time last year I put up a TikTok and it was something to do with Guinness, and it was like a bit of a tongue in cheek, something about like Guinness in the UK. Oh my God. The middle-aged men were out in force. I was like, this is actually hilarious. I think
this is the thing. It's funny.
You can laugh
it's
at
funny.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's like genuinely amusing. And like sometimes the thing that really cracks me up is when it's in the middle of the night and I'm like, you are like, that thing where it's like you're in the pitch dark and your phone's just in front of your face. And I'm just like, the fact that I'm there in the room with you enough for you to be in the middle of the night watching my stuff and going, I'm like, it's funny. Like, it's genuinely amusing,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You talk on your TikTok a lot as well about helping women, in particular Irish women, to become more unapologetic. So first of all, could you talk a bit about that, and then also why you say in particular Irish women?
Yes. So I think like just from growing up, and this is right across all types of Irish women, you can be a Protestant and unionist as well, right? I just think one thing that does unite our culture right across the island is this sort of like, it's like you're almost apologizing for existing, and the whole idea of like, she thinks she is someone, that's actually a title in one of the chapters in my book, because it's that, to me, that's such a like, it's such a uniquely Irish phrase, this idea that like, oh my God, you think something of yourself, and like that is the worst possible thing that you can do. And I find that really sad, because it's like, what's wrong with that, And whenever you actually really deep it and you think about like, the Magdalens and the mother and baby homes and things like that, like being a woman that has autonomy in Ireland has been dangerous for, well, I mean, when did the last Magdalen close? I think it was like 1997 or something.
Yeah, around about then.
Yeah. So it's like, this has been dangerous literally until our generation. And I saw a thing the other day that like divorce, you've only been able to be divorced for the last...
Yeah, I think it was like, again, the 90s, mid-90s.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, we have had to like shrink ourselves, shrink our dreams, to feel safe right across the island. And so the whole like unapologetic thing, well, the Irish thing in particular is just because that's who I'm speaking to, and like that's who I have lived experience of. And then the unapologetic thing was just like a little thing I said one day, and then I was kind of like, oh, I think I'm going to keep this. Because somebody actually, I said it randomly in a video, and then someone messaged me and was like, oh, like unapologetic is such a good way to put it. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to like steal that from myself. But it's like, we really are like, I feel like we're super apologetic. You know that thing, it's like an Irish woman like walking somewhere and she's like, oh, sorry. But like, we really do that. And I also noticed I had to like unlearn it moving to England. I used to start sentences in meetings with sorry. Like before I even spoke, I would say sorry for speaking. So yeah, I really want us to like not like, I want to help as many women as possible to not feel like they have to do that.
I'm in the process of unlearning it as well. And again, like a million times I've ever said it, like, are flooding back into my brain. And I notice when I like, I'm going into a situation and I'm like, right, I need to not start this with going, I'm sorry, or ending it with, I'm sorry, or kind of, if that's okay, or if you don't mind, or would you mind, anything that's in that language. And it's hard because at the same time, as a woman, you're so scared of being perceived as aggressive instead of being assertive when you are being assertive. But I feel like you kind of don't have that ownership over how you're being perceived, and in a way that kind of like pushes people to just lean back into those, I'm sorry.
Yes, definitely. So I actually think I've been kind of lucky in a way to have been liberated from that, just because I am 6 foot tall. So obviously, like, not in the online setting, you can't tell, but in my professional life, I've worked with, like, for example, a lot of like middle-class English men who the universe would tell me that I should never speak to and never feel like equal to, or whatever. Not the universe, you know what I mean? The world, whatever. Sorry, it's been a long day. But, I should feel like I shouldn't be okay to speak in those environments. So I think just the fact that I'm tall has helped a lot with that, because I'm already perceived as aggressive, like, just because I'm taller than them. But on the aggressive thing, I feel like I've learned just to deal with that. And I'm like, especially having this accent, I've been in meetings before with English people who have jumped when I've spoke. Literally, like, they've had a physical, visceral reaction. And I'm like, I know that they are hearing Jerry Adams. Like, I'm speaking and they just went, oh my God, the Raz in the room with me. And it's like, like that is what's happening. And like, I know other women who have the same experience. So I'm just like, I've always been perceived as aggressive. So I just sort of feel like if that's going to come with the territory of me having autonomy and things going my way, then so be it, But it is definitely something that like takes a lot of work.
Yeah.
Also, I do have the privilege that I'm not in Ireland anymore. And I really do think if I was still in Ireland, all of this would have worked out very differently, because, I would be going and doing my shopping in the shop that I've been going to all my life. And I'd be worried of bumping into someone that I, might have insulted or might not like what I'm saying. So I think having a bit of removal from it definitely helps as well.
I agree with you. Yeah, I moved to Spain. I was there for a good while, and just by nature of learning the Spanish language and the way that they phrase things, it's far more direct. You're like, give me a beer. Like, can you imagine in Ireland going into a coffee shop like, give me a flat white. Like the embarrassment that you would probably feel after that. So yeah, I think it's good. You need to remove yourself sometimes from the situation in order to retrain the brain or whatever it might be. So you mentioned you moved to the UK. How has it been for you as somebody from the north living in the UK? Have you noticed anything in particular beyond people jumping out of their seat when you open your mouth?
Yeah. So I lived in Leeds and now I live in London, and they're both very different. Leeds was great because Leeds is like the north, Northerners, like there really is that whole like north-south divide in England as well. Like that's not a joke, it is very different. Where I am now is in South London, which is different than North London, but like where I am now, I'm in a very multicultural part of the world. And also recently I now work part-time in a hair salon on reception, and that's the first time I've been around like working class English people in my day-to-day for years, because the work I was doing in like journalism and like human rights and stuff was always very middle class people, and they will make you feel so different about yourself. And I don't even blame them, because like the system has been set up for them. They like, I would meet people who would come across to me as really rude or really judgmental, but I was like, I don't even blame them because they just don't know any better, But being back around working class people, you're like, oh yeah, this is where, like, this is like the rhythm that I'm used to. This is the environment I'm used to. And working class English people are very different to middle class English people. And I get messages sometimes from people who have just moved to uni from the north, from all over Ireland actually, but a lot of the time from the north, who are really struggling because they're like, I'm suddenly conscious of everything about myself. And that's exactly what happened to me. I remember like the first seminar I had at uni, I went to speak and I was like, I don't even know how to speak like these people. And we're literally not taught, people who go to private school are taught how to articulate themselves. So they learn this whole kind of armor going out in the world that we don't get. And when I went to Leeds, I actually dropped out of the posh uni and then went back a year later to the working class uni. Such was like the contrast in the classes. So I think it's made me very perceptive living here of like class structures and things like that, but just also like being perceived constantly all the time. And that like obviously shapes who you are as a person massively.
Yeah, as you said, when you grew up in the north, you were also doing a lot of observation and scanning, and again, you're probably a little bit trained to do that again. I think we're kind of coming near the end, Gemma. So I'm going to ask you the question that I ask all of my guests after the name of the podcast. What does it mean to you to be Irish?
Ooh. To me, being Irish is like a spiritual, it's the closest thing I have to like God or that sort of like spiritual experience. It's growing up with an intrinsic tie to like nature and the elements and something beyond you. And when I go back home, I'm never more inspired than when I am at home. And I think Irishness is just like an essence. It's something that I don't think it's in any way linked to skin color or to even where you're from. I think Irishness really is like, it's an essence. It's a sort of, people talk about like Irish hospitality and all that kind of thing, but it's a real thing, and we love art so much. And I think the way that we express ourselves through art is, like I say, as close as you can get to religion for me. It's like a need. It's like we have no option but to express ourselves. So yeah, I think Irishness for me is a spiritual experience more than anything.
Wow, I don't think I've ever had anyone who said that before. I love that answer. I love that you're like, it's God.
No, actually, being Irish it's God.
We started with religion and we ended with religion as well. Do you have anything else that you would like to add or you'd like the listeners to know about?
Just please keep your eyes peeled for when I get this book deal, because I am really passionate about it. I'm really excited about it, and I really want people to like gain an understanding of what it's like growing up in the north, because it's a crazy place and it's ever changing. So I hope I've managed to capture at least a little snapshot of what it's like for some people.
Brilliant. Yeah, very best of luck with it, Gemma. I'll be keeping my eyes peeled.
Thank
and
you.
Keep following you on TikTok and your journey. And thank you so much for sharing everything today. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. That was my interview with Gemma McSherry. So Gemma has a book that she has written, which we were talking about in that episode. So do keep an eye out for it. We really hope that she gets a book deal soon. Let me know if you liked this episode. Leave a comment. Did you enjoy the topics that we covered? As always, share this episode with a friend who you think would enjoy it. Throw it up on your Instagram story. Tag me in it. I would love to see it. I'll repost it. Thank you so much. All right, Gurv, mil mahagut. I hope that you have a fantastic weekend, a fantastic week, wherever you are.